SpaceX Starship will have a lot of successes in 2025, but not all of them. So I'm going to go into my 2025 predictions for the space industry. But first, I'm going to talk about what I got wrong with my 2024 predictions, which it was a mixed bag. One thing the space industry has taught us is that we are always too optimistic with timelines, with budgets, and what we can accomplish in a year span. But take a long enough time frame and we actually can accomplish a lot. And therefore, I'm going to go into what I got wrong with my 2024 predictions, which I will link above, and also talk about what I think is happening in 2025 realistically. If you haven't been following me, I am a space analyst. I've been working in the space industry for over 20 years, and I tend to take a bit more of a pessimistic view when it comes to spaceflight achievements. I celebrate the achievements. I mean, like the timelines, the budgets. I always think that space companies hype them up for their own workforce, for future workforces that they want to recruit, and for investors and other stakeholders. They really want to say aspirational timelines and aspirational visions, and not so much with the realism. So that's the difference here. Is I'm going to go into what realistically is going to happen in 2025 in the space industry. I started off 2024 predictions saying that Artemis 2 was not going to launch, and I was correct there. I thought it would launch in 2025. I thought that's when it would slip till. No, the current date for Artemis 2 is no earlier than April 2026. So even though I said I think it'll launch in 2025 and I was wrong, I actually think now it'll launch in 2026. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe it'll be completely canceled. One of my major excitement points a year ago was the upcoming CLPS missions, Commercial Lunar Payload Services. Those are NASA missions, small missions. They were highly risky, and NASA thought they might get a 50% chance of success. And I thought with Intuitive Machines and Astrobotic launching in early 2024 that we would see these CLPS missions prove themselves, that at least one would be successful. And we saw one that was mostly successful. Intuitive Machines 1 mission did topple over on its side, but it did softly land and it accomplished most of its objectives. Astrobotic did not make it to the moon, so they did not accomplish all their objectives, but they actually tested some things in space. So it was a mixed bag. It was not as successful as I envisioned it would be a year ago. There were several CLPS missions that were scheduled for 2024 that I thought would probably, either be at the end of the year or slip until 2025. Looks like they all slipped to 2025. Those were Astrobotic Griffin Mission 1, Intuitive Machines 2 and 3, SpaceX's Starship HLS demo mission. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost M1, and iSpace's Sakatu R Mission 2 with the Resilience lander. Now those last two, Firefly and iSpace, they are actually confirmed to be launching on the same Falcon 9 rocket in January. So even though they were scheduled for 2024, they will launch in early 2025. So that's really exciting. I really think at least one CLPS mission will be completely successful in 2025. Another prediction I made was that Sierra Space Dream Chaser, after about 20 years of development, will finally launch in 2024, and I was wrong. And it's no wonder I said this because it was scheduled for April 2024, but the current date is no earlier than May 2025. So I do think that Dream Chaser will fly in 2025. Let's see if I'm wrong again in a year. I said, and these are my exact words, Starship will successfully launch to orbit in 2024. And that was not right. That was not quite right? It got to space a couple of times, but it never reached orbit. It never actually went completely around the Earth. It went pretty high up there in altitude and in apogee, but it did not actually get to orbit. But I think that's coming in 2025. I do think Starship, which has had phenomenal success with their test missions, has the ability to launch to orbit in 2025. And then I had an easy one for myself at the end. I said that SpaceX will launch 100 times in 2024. For reference, SpaceX launched 96 to 98 times in 2023, and the number varies, I think, because successful launches versus total launches. I haven't gone back and counted myself. So they were pretty close in 2023 to getting to that 100 mark. So I thought 2024, no problem. They will blow that out of the water, and they did. Their aim was to launch 144 times in 2024. So they didn't quite make that. And I knew they weren't going to do that, but they got to 134 launches in 2024. That's an iPhone video that I took last night or early this morning, technically, holding a 1-year-old who did not want to stay asleep, taken from our backyard. So that was the last launch of the year. And I think that we will see even more success in 2025. Elon Musk has said that SpaceX will probably launch over 180 times in 2025. Obviously, he's giving that aspirational number. I think it'll be closer to 150, maybe, between 150 and 180. I don't think it'll get to 180. Going back to Starship for a moment, I think that SpaceX will prove orbital fueling for Starship in 2025. This is a major, major goal. This is something that is absolutely crucial for the Artemis program and also for a lot of other missions that SpaceX wants to do, going to Mars, for example. So this is so crucial. And I think that they've had so many milestones in the past couple of years with Starship that they will be ready in 2025, that they will attempt an in-orbit fuel transfer. And I think they'll get there, actually. It might not be the first time, but I think that in 2025, by the end of the year, they will have successfully proven that they can transfer fuel in orbit with Starship. Now, we got a lot of other launchers other than SpaceX's Vulcan and Starship. Vulcan, this one cracks me up. I'm sorry. So Vulcan, unfortunately, only launched 2 times in 2024, and I didn't make any predictions about Vulcan. It launched in January and October, and now United Launch Alliance is saying that it wants to launch 20 times in 2025, split about half and half between Vulcan and Atlas Vs. It has several Atlas Vs remaining for Project Kuiper, Amazon, etc. And I don't see that happening. I don't see, let's just assume 10 as that number. I don't see Vulcan launching 10 times in 2025. That would be almost monthly, and ULA has not had that cadence in many years. And so what I expect to see is that Vulcan will launch more than twice in 2025, but a lot fewer than 10. I want ULA to ramp up. I want them to succeed, but they just are not, it's not in their company culture right now. They value success of mission above all at this point. So to give you a point of reference for what Vulcan is actually going to carry, their first national security space launch, that's NSSL mission, which was supposed to be this quarter, Q4 of 2024, got pushed until no earlier than Q2 of 2025. Not even Q1, but Q2 of 2025. And then the Sierra Space Dream Chaser, as I said, that was supposed to launch this year, and it got pushed no earlier than May of 2025. Blue Origin New Glenn will launch more than once in 2025 is my prediction. It is currently on the pad. They just had a hot fire a few days ago. They are set for no earlier than January 6th. I actually think they're not going to launch on January 6th. I think that they have some issues to work through, but I'm optimistic that they're going to launch in early 2025 and then launch again sometime later that year. How many launches in 2025? I don't know, but let's just say more than one. Rocket Lab Neutron, it's been in development for so long. They have hardware. They did a successful hot fire of the engine Archimedes in August of this year. And so I really think that Neutron's on a good path to launch in 2025. They're currently aiming for the middle of the year. And I think they could actually do that. Mid to end of the year is, I think, where they will see Neutron launch. Interestingly, they signed a commercial customer, but they're not saying who it is, and they're not going to fly that until 2026. So they don't really have an incentive to speed up their launch cadence in 2025 when the first commercial launches won't be until 2026. I don't think that any commercial space stations will launch in 2025. This was a target for VAST Haven 1, and I don't think that they're going to make it. They were just finalizing designs in 2024, so I don't even know if they have any hardware. They haven't released any photos of any hardware that they have for Haven 1. I think it's much more realistic that they will launch in 2026. It's not a ride issue because they're launching with SpaceX, so SpaceX I think can launch them pretty much anytime. I think it's much more like they're just not going to be ready to launch Haven 1 in 2025. At one point, Axiom Space was actually planning to launch its first station habitat to dock to the International Space Station in 2025. That has obviously been pushed. They have redesigned their space stations. They're going to launch the power module first. I have a video about that if you want to check that out. I think they were already so delayed that I think it doesn't really delay them that much, but it's definitely not going to be in 2025. I don't even think it's 2026. I think we're seeing like 2027, 2028, maybe even 2029 before we see the first Axiom stations module launch and attach to the ISS. And then the other commercial space stations, I don't think they're anywhere close. And we've got Starlab, we've got Orbital Reef. I just don't think that we are going to see those launch in 2025 and probably not even 2026. But I do have some good news for VAST. I think NASA will approve VAST for a private astronaut mission. So a few years ago, NASA opened up this concept of private astronaut missions. It's not really a new concept. The Russians have been doing it. Space Adventures, the private company in the United States, have been working with Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, to fly private individuals, wealthy individuals, to the International Space Station. NASA opened that up. They called it PAMS, and they said that they wanted to do 2 PAMS a year, no more than 2 a year. And so far, Axiom has only done one PAM a year. Axiom 4 is scheduled to launch in 2025. I think that really opens it up for VAST to be a competitor to Axiom with these private astronaut missions. I don't know when VAST is going to launch their first private astronaut mission. It's in coordination with SpaceX, of course. But I don't know if they're going to be ready to launch that in 2025, but I think they'll get approved to launch PAMs in 2025. Some more bad news. I don't think that the cargo, the demo missions for the human landing systems for either SpaceX or Blue Origin are going to launch in 2025 as they had expected. Back in March of this year, there was an interview with a person from Blue Origin who said that they wanted to launch a demo mission uncrewed of Blue Moon in 12 to 16 months, which would put it somewhere in, the spring or summer of 2025. And that's not happening. I really don't see Blue Moon flying in 2025 at all. Same with Starship. Starship has a lot of successes behind its belt, but I think it needs to prove itself a bit more and really focus on some other things before Starship HLS uncrewed demo mission goes to the moon. So I think both of those are targets for 2026 more realistically. On the policy side of things in the United States, it is being shaken up, right? The new Trump administration has nominated or will nominate Jared Isaacman to be the next NASA administrator. I predict that he will get approved after some, pushback from Congress. The Senate has to approve him, and I think there'll be some tough questions in that hearing. I'm looking forward to seeing that, but I think that ultimately he will get approved. I don't think there's any political will to not approve him. I think that some other cabinet picks and other picks that Trump has put forth will be a lot more controversial than Jared. And therefore, I think that just based on the fact that Jared seems to be almost universally praised by the space industry, myself included, that he will get that nomination approved and become the next NASA administrator in 2025. Now, what else will happen with space policy in 2025? I couldn't even begin to tell you because it's a bit of a wild card with Trump, isn't it? I think that the National Space Guard concept seems to be something that is popular right now that could very well come to fruition. I mean, he created the U.S. Space Force. It wasn't his idea, but he took that idea that had been, incubating and made it happen. And I think the same thing will probably happen with the National Space Guard. I think that within NASA, something big will be canceled. What? I don't know. I made a whole video on what I wanted to see happen with NASA, but I don't know what is actually going to happen with NASA and what its programs, which ones are going to succeed, which ones are going to be just cut, and what's going to be restructured. But I think that things will be shaken up within NASA's big programs, especially human spaceflight in 2025 and beyond. This is not so much a prediction as it is a trend I'm seeing. A lot more missions are focusing on what the actual mission is, the result of the mission, what are they trying to accomplish, rather than what the orbit of the satellite or vehicle is. For several years, we've seen a bit of battles of like Leo is better than MEO, or like GEO is as advantages over Leo. Like we've just seen like orbital battles over where things should be placed, and I think that's going to go away in favor of multi-orbit capability to focus more on the mission. What's the mission is trying to achieve, and not like where are you in relation to the surface of the Earth, but like more like where do you need to be to get the mission done, and maybe you need to be in multiple orbits, and maybe you need to have the capability to move within various orbits depending on what your mission is at the time. And finally, the Artemis Accords. I need to do a whole video on this at some point, but the Artemis Accords got to 52 signatories by the end of the year. So any of those end of year articles that were written that said like 48 or 49 signatories, they were out of date by the time the year ended, because we had a rapid succession of new signatories at the end of the year, 52. So I didn't make a 2024 prediction about the Artemis Accords, but I did say in a video I'll post above that I thought that the Artemis Accords would get to about 50, or about a quarter of the number of countries in the world by the time the Artemis Accords as a whole met again. And they haven't met again yet. So absolutely, and that prediction came true. I don't know what the number of signatories is going to be by the end of 2025, but it'll be probably more than 60. I guess I'll go out there and make that prediction that the Artemis Accords will grow to beyond 60 by the end of 2025. What are your 2025 predictions? Whatever you think is going to happen in the next year, put them in the comments below. I'd love to know, and then compare notes for a year from now.